Welcome to day 3 of our International Students Week celebrations. I'm Emma Scott, Representation Manager at CIPS, and delighted to join you here today. There's so many of you come from a real global audience, so it's really great to bring some of you together. I've been jotting down where you're all from Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Georgia, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Australia. So some of you have got up early, some of you are still staying up late. So yeah, it's really great to have you here today. And if you've missed any of the sessions that we've been running this week, then don't forget to go to the CIPS homepage and you'll be able to find the International Student Celebration Day week page there and go back and look at all of the recordings from next week. There's loads of resources there, so you can go there straight away and find out more and try and get some answers to your questions. Anyway, today we're lucky enough to be joined by Scott Dance from Hayes. Hi, Scott.
Hi Emma, how you doing?
Yeah, it's great. Lovely to have you here. And honestly, you're a great audience, and you're lucky enough to have Scott and his expertise here to help you to talk today about your career path and developing your career path. So, Scott, just a little bit about you. Over 18 years experience advising clients on workforce management solutions, and you also provide strategic leadership for Hayes. Can you believe CIPS and Hayes have been working for 6 years now on our
No.
partnership? So I've shared in the chat a link to all the resources that CIPS have provided for CIPS members to help you on your career path, including the hotly anticipated annual salary guide that comes out. So make sure you click on that link and find out more. And all of that will be available through the web page too. So today we're going to be talking to Scott about how you can set plans in place for your future career development. So make sure that keep this session as interactive as possible. So I've got lots of questions for you, Scott, but please submit your own questions too. And any that we don't get round to, we're going to try and do a little sum up at the end of the week and pop them on the website too. So that's enough from me. Scott, I guess we'll start off with really, how important is it to have a plan? I think lots of people talk about, you get asked the question, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? But we don't often put a great deal of thought in how we're going to get there within those 5 years. So if we could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think you're right. That old question, either from yourself or from an interviewer or your boss, of where do you want to be in 5 years, always comes up. And you'd be amazed that, given that it's kind of a real topic of conversation, and everybody knows that you're going to be asked that, it's very clear to me. And a lot of people that I speak to at all different levels don't actually often have a real good answer on it, if I'm
Yeah.
honest. I think partly because 5 years is a long time away. So from a career plan point of view, you have 3 goals. So whilst your overall objective may well be 5 years and where you want to be in 5 years' time, and I would concentrate that on your career rather than money, or rather than how much money do I want to be earning in 5 years. I would think about the kind of the role, what skills would you have learned. So that's the kind of long-term plan. You need to then also set in a medium plan, which I'll probably say is kind of where do you want to be in 3 years, that will help you to be enable you to get to where you want to be in 5 years. And then some short-term goals, because again, as I say, 3 years is still a long time away, and it can seem forever. So set yourself a plan of where do you want to be within the next year or 2 years, which will enable you to get to the third year to fifth year, and make sure you have that strategic place in play. Certain things to kind of think about is learning is obviously a crucial part. So all the way from your kind of technical skills and brushing up on them at certain levels, but also your softer skills. And I know I'm sure we're going to come to talk about that in a minute, so I'll leave that one there. But also start thinking about the types of company that you want to work for.
Yeah.
What type of industry do you want to work in? What country do you want to work in? Location, all those types of things, to have a real robust 5-year objective, but broken down into smaller chunks. So then you can start achieving that. And then obviously your year to 2-year goals, start breaking that down into quarters of the year. What do I want to do? And set little objectives for yourself, which will then help you to get to where you want to be.
Excellent. Good advice. And how important is the diverse and breadth of experience, I guess, across roles and sectors if you ultimately want that long-term trajectory into a more senior role?
Yeah, good question. You kind of need to work out, first of all, is it the CPO job that you want to be in 5 years' time? Is it the head of procurement? Is it the head of indirects? And then you need to work out then what skills you need to be able to get there. So, becoming a head of procurement across an indirect category is slightly different to then becoming a CPO, for example, or a head of directs, for example. I think the key thing is actually to get as much exposure to different industry sectors, different categories as you possibly can. I think I've heard Malcolm previously say that, his role as obviously CEO, you need a lot of different, especially you need to understand about legal, you need to understand about kind of commercial. So, if I was you right now, I would, in working within your company, I would kind of make sure that I was working across a number of different, I suppose, sectors or categories or departments. So make sure that you're kind of familiar with what legal do, for example. What do your sales teams do? What do your IT department? And you don't need to be an expert in all of them, but get an
No.
understanding of how their days work and how a business is run ultimately will help you, even if you don't want to be that CPO, but it'll help you to understand how a business operates and runs, which will then enable you to help that company with their procurement decisions
Excellent. And
and hopefully help
yeah,
you in your career.
all that technical knowledge and experience is really, really important. But I guess what keeps coming up year on year in the salary guide is that need for soft skills. And are you seeing more people looking for that when they're looking for candidates?
Yeah, I guess we've probably seen that now over the last few years. So not just not just because of what's going on at the moment. Although I will say that some of them are even more prevalent now than they ever have been. So communication skills is one of those. And actually, communication skills have kind of changed over the years. So if I probably spoke about this 5 years ago, it'd be communication skills with the suppliers and making
Yeah.
sure that you kind of understand what's going on there. Well, I think now that's probably changed over the years. It's more about internal communication and how you can get your stakeholders on board. Because ultimately speaking, if you don't have them on board from the start and they're bought into what you're trying to do, then it'll all fall down anyway. So communication skills is obviously very key, which then in turn comes onto influencing.
Yeah.
So influencing your stakeholders and also suppliers as well. We can't have one without the other, if you like. But I think the onus at the moment is on internal stakeholder management from an influencing communication point of view, as opposed to external suppliers. Whilst that is obviously still important.
Yeah, that need to kind of real story tell and promote the procurement function internally. I think we're seeing that as an ongoing thing that's needed. Do you see though procurement getting a bit more prominence in organisations? We've had a couple of questions around that. Do you see that as a little bit more of a trend, even though it's important to have those skills and keep at it promoting procurement? Are you seeing a bit more appreciation for what we do?
Yeah, I definitely have. I mean, if there is a silver lining on what's going on in the world at the moment, which aren't too many, I think it's the rise of procurement. Have we ever seen our MP in the UK specifically talking about how great procurement have been throughout all of this pandemic, with from PPE to food banks to whatever you think? No, we haven't on national TV, where we've seen that now. So transform that back into the conversations that I'm having more locally. Yes, actually, we're seeing an influx of more businesses looking at expanding their procurement teams. Whether that is actually happening right now is another thing, but actually talking about it a little bit more and hopefully raising the profile of procurement within an organization and making it more of a strategic element to a business, as opposed to some businesses looking at it as more of a tactical back office function.
I know some CPOs I've talked to said they've never been into many board meetings as they have done recently.
Which is great.
Yeah, they've never been so busy, but never been so popular as well, which is great. So getting back to, I guess, the on track to the career plan. I guess there isn't always a clear career progression plan, within your own organisations, and people might be reluctant to leave their current role, especially in this climate. How do you start to broach those conversations with your line manager, where you can't see that there's a natural place for you to go?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most trickiest kind of ways to how do I go and speak to a manager about promotions. Now, what I would do and what I advise really is making sure that you have a kind of an honest approach with your manager at all times. So from things like explaining about what you want to do. So once you've got a robust kind of 2-year plan, 3-year plan, explain it to them. That's what you want to do, and where you want to see that. So from a learning point of view, most people, when they go and speak to their bosses about promotion, it's about, I want a pay rise, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. They don't talk about the actual why they want a different job. So exposure to different categories from a learning point of view. And again, also being open with your boss around what their career plans are too. Because actually what people often forget in a career review, for example, is they forget to ask their boss, what's your career plan? Because ultimately they may, no doubt, wanting to be looking to move on themselves.
Yeah.
And actually you might be kind of aligned into maybe wanting their job one day, or asking them how they're going to get there. And then can you kind of learn off of them and also teach each other? So it's kind of really having an open relationship with your manager. And I think if you do that from day one, then actually it doesn't become such an awkward conversation, because it's pretty clear. And if at some stage, things don't quite work out because there is a bit of a ceiling there and you can't, and you've got to move on, then they'll understand that a little bit more. Because I think the probably hardest thing that anyone has to do is hand in their notice.
Yeah.
Which is a dreadful, fearful thing to do. And sometimes that can't be helped.
No,
but actually, if you've had that open dialogue throughout, actually your boss won't be so annoyed when you do that, because you've been open all along.
yeah, and quite often I think I've seen it in places I've worked where I wish people had that conversation with us before they went off and got another role, and perhaps we could have done something. Might not have been the leap that they thought they could get immediately, but put in some interim steps or something. So I'd really encourage people to have that conversation.
Yeah, and we see so many candidates when they've got a new role, they hand in their notices, how many of them get counter offered? Yeah. And it may well be something like, I wanted support with my CIPS training, for example, but because you've not expressed that to your boss previously, or you've kind of done it on an ad hoc way without a formal plan, that can be facilitated potentially. So you don't need to do anything else. You just, again, have that open dialogue.
Definitely. Good advice. Good advice. So there will be some people who are still looking to move, even though these are quite difficult times. And salary seems to be a dominant factor. And I know Karen's put a question on here about work-life balance as well. But what other things should people be looking out for from your employer on top of salary? Or what are those really good things that you should be looking for from a sound employer or something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess, salary will always be a domineering factor. Not many people will move for a pay cut. Some will. So that's probably always going to be at the top of a salary guide, of a factor of moving. But you're right, there's so many other factors now that we're being asked about, especially again in this current world. Your flexible working is hugely key. But I think that defining flexible working, so if you're an employer looking to hire, what is your flexible working policy? It's no good just saying we have a flexible working policy. What does it look like? Does it mean then I can work from home every day? I appreciate we're in lockdown at the moment in the UK, but when a world gets back to some sort of normality, does that mean I can work from home forever? Is it 2 or 3 days a week? Can I work flexi hours? Yeah. What does that look like in terms of the package? And then on top of that, pension schemes, what are the contributions from the employer? Then you're kind of looking at flexible benefits. So companies that do this pretty well, it kind of caters for everybody. It depends on what journey you're on in your life. So for example, some people like going to the gym. So is there a discount on gym membership? Some people have children. Is there childcare vouchers that you can have? Yeah. Is there kind of taste card? So can you get discount on restaurants if that's what you like doing, or holiday insurance, and all these flexible benefits that you can pick and choose when you want. And those are the employers that are kind of onboarding people. I think aside from packages per se, a lot of people now are looking at the culture of the organization. So a lot of people now will look at Glassdoor, for example. Before I'm going to interview with a said company or apply, I'm going to look at their Glassdoor report to see what people say about them. So if you're an employer on there looking to hire, then I would seriously have a look at what people say about your business and your company. I'd also, ED&I is a huge topic at the moment, and is on the rise. So what does your ED&I policy look like? Is it on your website open? And is it open? Is it on your job description? Is it something you talk about when you're interviewing candidates? Because people want to know that. And actually, if you've got a very robust industry and you've got some case studies, then promote and highlight them, because you're probably more likely to attract that person. And with all those things that I've just mentioned, salary becomes less of a kind of a domineering factor.
Yeah. The ED&I, and a couple of people have asked what that is. I guess we're using acronyms here. So that the equality and diversity agenda and inclusion agenda, I think, is becoming more and more important to people, isn't it? And I guess doing that research on those organisations to get a feel for what their culture and their stand is on things. A lot more organisations are being more outspoken and vocal about how they deal with those issues. That I think is going to be really important to people going forward. They want to know that they're working in that kind of environment.
Yeah, and it's kind of having an equal opportunity to get those promotions, right?
Yeah.
To be able to set out and execute your career plans, knowing that no matter race, age, gender, etc., you're going to have a fair, kind of a fair journey within your organisation to promotion.
Absolutely, really important. So, I mean, there have been lots of people, unfortunately, that have lost their job or been made redundant through these difficult times. And what advice would you give people? And we've had a couple of questions about this, about kind of how do you make yourself stand out from the crowd, but also, how could you turn to social media or networking virtually to make yourself build your own personal brand, I guess?
I think that's key, probably even more so now than ever, around your personal brand. So the amount of times where I've seen all different people from all different levels, the first thing I would do when I'm advising them on their careers, I'll look at their LinkedIn profile. That's number one. And you'll be amazed at how many of them actually don't even say what you do. So it may say procurement manager as an example in the company you work for, but what do you do within that? I mean, it's a broad title, whilst you might not want to put your kind of key achievements, but if you've won awards, even internal awards, put them on. It's going to make you more appealing.
Yeah.
Be active. Again, there's a lot of people that are on LinkedIn but don't share posts. And actually, we have so much data and so many posts available now that you can very easily point and click something and post it as a story and write comments. I think the other things as well is don't just like and share.
Yeah.
Create some of your own content as well.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to put a selfie of yourself doing something that's inspirational. And at the same time, I guess we spoke earlier about this, that there's a fine line, because LinkedIn isn't Facebook per se. So it's still your professional environment. So you've got to have a balance between looking personable and being professional, but also having your kind of work history and the kind of the backgrounds, almost like a small version of your CV. Really, that's what you want. Because ultimately, if people are searching and word searching, you want the words procurement, sourcing, category, depends on what you do, directs, indirects, if you buy IT, technology. So you want to have all those kind of buzzwords within your profile as well, so people can find you easily.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of looking at webinars, you're making sure that you're joining them. And when you do join a webinar, if you can have an interactive session, make sure that you are speaking.
Yeah.
There are lots of smaller roundtable events at kind of 15, 20 people. Make sure you speak, because you don't know the people that are on that webinar may be your future employer. So again, be as active as you can.
Absolutely. And I think, whether it's events like this or training sessions or whatever it is, I usually go on and to LinkedIn and try and connect into some of those people that we've interacted with during those sessions. And I think, to make those broader connections is really important. So I'd encourage everyone to go on and do that. And you're absolutely right. It's not about click, share and comments, create as well. That's really, really important.
Yeah,
So people...
And also, I think, looking at your career plan, and especially if you're unemployed at the moment, start thinking about the companies that you want to work for.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to approach either the HR recruiter that's on site there, or even the head of procurement. saying, look, I'm out of work at the moment. I'm really interested in working for your company because of X, Y, Z. Can we have a conversation? There's no harming. It takes 2 seconds to write that directly to somebody. And sometimes you won't hear back. Sometimes you will, and you just never know.
Yeah, and more organisations and recruitment agencies are using LinkedIn as a search engine, as a tool to find people. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Let me see what questions we've got through. Oh yeah, so some people were talking about relevance from switching to different sectors, and you know, are there different skills and experience you need, or do you find that people are quite receptive to taking people on from different sectors and into different roles?
Yeah, I think we've seen that change over the last few years. Again, probably previously, no. So, you know, if you worked in the public sector, people wanted people that had OG, for example, experience.
Yeah.
It's not so much of an essential item in a lot of companies now. There's still a lot of businesses that will still want to recruit from the backgrounds that they've either come from or the industry that they work in. And this comes a little bit down to ED&I. Again, I'm using an acronym, but I think we understand that now. So hopefully I can use that.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes down to idea sharing. And I completely believe that, you know, if you're a sound procurement professional with a good technical background, as well as the softer skills, that you can actually go into any sector, because actually the same approach that you take to your daily life and your working life should be the same. Yeah, we've seen now a lot of public sector organizations in the UK actually demand people from the private sector just for kind of different idea sharing, because actually if you hire people from the same background as yourself or the same industry sector, you get similar ideas, where if you kind of change it up, then actually that drives behaviors within internally, and also hopefully pushes your procurement forward in a better light.
I can absolutely resonate with that with some CPOs I've talked to, and it creates more diverse thinking, which is another part of this the agenda there. Some people said, you know, is there kind of a any kind of guidelines or advice you'd give on how long you should be in a job before you go and seek out another one? Does it look bad that our CV is a big long list of roles that we've perhaps only been in for a year or something?
Yeah, from an interim point of view, it doesn't necessarily matter that much. Although I will say that most interims within the procurement world are normally on 6-month contracts at least. So, you know, if you've had 1 or 2 months here and there, then that doesn't necessarily potentially show you in the best light possible, because you will all know that to do something that's you've been brought in to do takes more than just a month or 6 weeks. From a permanent point of view, actually we're seeing the average procurement person staying in their job within probably 2 to 3 years. It may well change a little bit over the course of this year, for example, with people not necessarily wanting to move as quickly as they would normally. But actually kind of a 3-year stint is probably sufficient. It's different probably 10 years ago, where people were looking at 5 years, 10 years within an organization, and employers were saying that's loyalty, which it does show loyalty. But also you can sometimes get a bit stale within your role. So if you are within a company for a long period of time, that's not a bad thing. But what have you done? What different jobs have you undertaken in that? And if you have undertaken levies of different jobs, make sure you detail them on your CV. So it doesn't
Yeah.
look like you've just stayed in the same job for a long period of time. You've had lots of different jobs within the company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good advice, really breaking down all those different strategic projects or something that you've got
Yeah.
involved with. Something around flexible working arrangements. I mean, I know lots of organisations were looking at this before COVID, and COVID has kind of forced it upon us. Do you think that this is a trend that will continue with, and what kind of impact do you think it would have on recruitment? I guess also we're all fishing from the same pond if we're all working from home.
Yeah, good question. I guess we are still in the unknown worldwide, not just in the UK. We're all on different, I guess, restrictions to an extent.
Yeah.
What do I think the future looks like? Actually, I think, again, kind of if there's a silver lining to reiterate that, I think actually most businesses now will have a flexible working approach of some degree moving forward, where they didn't before. What will that look like? I guess it depends on how productive individuals, teams have been during
Yeah.
the time of working from home. You know, I think that teams and I guess industry sector as well, if you have been in an industry that's been hit very hard and the business has been less productive at home, then I think the encouragement will be to go into the office. I think if you're in an industry that's been less harder hit and actually or been equally as productive at home, I think you'll see more of that. And what I do think you'll see is more people now working in different locations to what they live in.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, for example, would I live in the Midlands but work for a London company? Yes, because actually if I only have to go in a couple of days a week, I can manage that and then work from home the others. So I think we'll see a bit more of that going on.
Yeah. And what is the job market like at the moment? Is it fairly buoyant? Are there lots of roles around? Has this increased profile of procurement and the spotlight on it kind of forced more recruitment? Have you seen anything like that? Any trends?
We haven't yet, but I guess it's kind of we're in
It's early days.
Again,
Yeah.
it's early days. After from where we were from a lockdown point of view, if I look back to kind of May, June, the recruitment activity then, it's gone up a lot since then. Are we back to where we were a year ago? No, but we're not that far away now. And obviously with Christmas coming up, there is generally a bit of a slowdown, and also we're obviously still in lockdown as well.
Yeah.
So I think that the plans have been on hold a little bit right now, but actually the signs are encouraging. So all the clients that we're speaking to and all the people that we're speaking to throughout the industry, it's encouraging that there's going to be a lot more procurement recruitment activity within the next 6 months. I guess we'll see how we get on with vaccines and the pandemic first of all, but signs are certainly encouraging from expansion of teams to kind of taking their hiring plans off of hold that they were from kind of most of lockdown one.
Yeah, no, I guess as we gear up towards that, and I guess lots of organisations are looking at the way they source, the way they do business, and procurement will change a lot really on what we have to do. And I guess there's a time now where we could be really honing those key skills. And if you could leave us with maybe 2 or 3 areas where of advice where you think we should really start investing in and getting ourselves geared up a bit in terms of skills fit for the future.
Yeah, I guess kind of generic. I mean, there'd be some more specific stuff. Contract management is going to be very, very key from a technical point of view. We've got Brexit coming up, whatever that looks like. Who knows what sort of deal? But either way, contracts will have to change. So if you're working in a kind of a manufacturing type of industry where there's going to be a lot of import, export stuff going on, and also the public sector, contract management is going to be very key from a technical point of view. I think that, skills around communication, presenting online for things like this. So, how you engage with your suppliers. It's very hard, or a lot harder probably to negotiate like this in this environment than it is face to face. So making sure that you are able to present internally and externally on social media, and you understand the technology platforms and how they work and how to share documents and things like that are going to be for the future and probably here to stay. And the technology is going to get better and better. So it's making sure you stay in line and up to date with that. And then I guess from a softer skill point of view, influencing, which kind of ties into my previous point around stakeholder engagement, external, and how to influence on platforms like this, for example. And how do you get your message across? The whole, what you said earlier, Emma, about storytelling. Getting people on board at an early stage and getting a buy-in.
Absolutely. Really great advice. Thank you very much, Scott. We've had loads of questions. Hopefully we've got to most of you. Some of you have asked questions about CVs, etc. And I'm just about to put in the chat now a link to all of the resources that are available on the website from Hays. So go on and check that out. There's loads of information on there about CVs and putting your career plans in place, as well as those all-important salary guides, so you can go and benchmark yourself against that data. Scott, it's been brilliant to have you. Lovely to see you. Thanks ever so much for joining us. So that brings us to the end of the webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Like I say, these recordings will be available from next week, so we're all downloading them and getting them on the website ready. Also, if you decide to join or rejoin CIPS during this time up until the 31st of December, don't forget those special offer codes that will give you that £50 admin fee waived from that from your application. So we'll share the link to that on the screen in a second, but if you go to the CIPS homepage, you can link through from there too. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So tomorrow we've got our final webinar, and it's the power of a united community, where we'll be joined by some of our volunteers. And throughout the week, I've seen on the chat and through the Q&A lots of questions about how you can volunteer with CIPS and get involved. So there'll be more information on that then. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.